Good afternoon. In compliance with Chapter 551 of the Open Meetings Texas Government Code, I call to order a regular voting meeting of the Public Facility Corporation Board of Directors of the Austin Independent School District for Monday, February 24th, 2025 at 5:02 p.m. This meeting is being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We will move item 1.2, approval of the agenda. We will move to approval of the agenda. Secretary Boswell, do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? I second it. Having a motion by Director Boswell, Secretary Boswell, and second by myself to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Perfect. Welcome. Thank you. Director Gonzalez. The motion passes unanimously with a vote of 3 in favor by all those on the dais and online. Item 2, pardon me. We will now move to the action item on today's agenda. Secretary Boswell, do you have a motion to approve agenda item 2.1?
Yes, I move to approve item 2.1, October 10th, 2024, Public Facility Corporation voting meeting minutes.
Is there a second? I will second again. Directors, are there any questions? Okay, wonderful. Having a motion by Secretary Boswell and a second by myself to approve item 2.1. Seems like I got ahead of myself there.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, the motion passes unanimously. Right, is that what you got?
Yeah, I don't think we've raised our hands.
Did we not? Did I miss that part?
No, we did.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. I got ahead of myself. We did raise our hands, right? We didn't imagine that. We did not. Okay, then we both imagined that. Okay, let's start again. Having a motion by Secretary Boswell and a second by myself to approve item 2.1. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, good. That happened that time. I feel like that was a Mandela moment. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 3, AISD Public Facility Corporation for discussion. Item 3.1, Anita Coy Project Update. Next on the agenda is the Anita Coy Project Update. I'd like to welcome Jeremy Striffler, Director of Real Estate for Austin ISD, to share the update. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. I wanted to take the opportunity, since we're together again, and it's been a few months, to update you on the progress on the Coy redevelopment. So briefly, just a reminder of kind of the vision for the development. It was to include 2 Class A mixed income housing developments with approximately 335 units each, to preserve the heritage trees on the Coy campus and create pocket parks, to retain land for Austin ISD for future alternative learning center, to create public parkland that would feature recreation and other amenities for the community to enjoy, for the development to have sustainability features kind of aligned with our values as we do our bond modernization projects, also to include some nonprofit space within the housing development, and also to have an emphasis on family size units, meaning 2 or more bedrooms. And also, as a reminder, here's the breakdown of the units. So in total, we have estimated 674 units that will be built. 45% of those units will be 2 or 3 bedrooms, and half of them will be income restricted, either at 60% of the area median family income or at 80%. This is the current conceptual site plan for the site. The developer, the NRP Group, and their architect are working through the design as we speak, and we've had some community meetings already around that and more to come. And so as you can see, the 2 apartment buildings kind of navigating themselves around the heritage trees. And then in the northern portion of the site is the future parkland. And then the brown shaded area, that's the area that we've retained for the school district for the future school. So this is the project timeline. You know, since for quite a while, we've been, you know, we've been in the design, permitting, and community engagement phase, and that will continue through November. But what's most exciting is we are on target now for a groundbreaking in December of 2025, so the construction can start. So what's not on the screen, but what that implies is this summer, at the end of the school year, you know, we will vacate the existing facility and relocate the ALC, the Alternative Learning Center, and JJAP into swing space, and then also help relocate the service partners that are at that facility as well, along with our parent support specialist team that's also housed there. And so those moves will happen during the summer. We'll have the demolition of the existing facility, and then by December, we anticipate we'll have a groundbreaking and construction will start and take us until about February 2028 for the housing to open. So wanted to give you just a summary so far of where we're at with our community engagement, which the NRP group has been leading, you know, dating back to April 1st when we had a community meeting April 1st of last year when we had community meetings around the zoning. More recently, we've met with the Equity Advisory Committee of the District Advisory Council. We also had an in-person meeting after you all approved officially the agreements. We met in person at the Coy site with the community. We've then most recently talked to the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Council of all the sustainable features of the project that are planned, and then upcoming, the NRP group and their team will have community meetings around the green space and parkland, and then another one around placekeeping, the public art, and the nonprofit partnership. And so then finally, next steps, so what you can be looking forward to in the next, 6 to 8 months left in the year. So we've got the transfer of the property from the school district to the PFC. This will then allow for us to execute those ground leases for the use for the housing. So that will be on the agenda for the school district board agenda in March. As I mentioned already, in July and August is when we'll look to start the environmental remediation of the existing building and ultimately the demolition. And that'll all be in coordination with the district too, to make sure that we're salvaging anything and everything we can. And then in November, the NRP group will be looking to obtain their final building and site development permits from the city of Austin. And at that time, we'll execute those ground leases. And as a reminder of the term sheet that we executed for each housing building, because there's two for each building, we will receive an upfront fee in that November when those ground leases are executed. There will be later, once the housing is open, then we'll start getting annual ground payments, but we will have some upfront fees in November. And then in December, the NRP group will have their financial closing, meaning, they've got all the money to do construction, et cetera, and we'll have that groundbreaking. And then from there on, take a while, but they'll be under construction. But all necessary safety measures, et cetera, will be in place to make sure that, the community is protected, and also our hope is that we'll be able to leave some of the parkland open during construction as well for continued access throughout. So with that, I'll see if you have any questions. Otherwise, happy to move to the next agenda item with you.
Directors, are there any questions?
Great.
Okay, I think there might be Director Gonzalez. Do you have questions, Director Gonzalez?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay. You just look at this intense look. I thought he had a question.
Sorry, I was, I don't know where my mouse was.
That's okay. I do have a question, and Summer can let me know if it needs to be answered or how it can be answered. I know, I don't know anything about construction, but as we begin to build, I guess, much like a house, if you secure payment, then you have that payment no matter what else happens in the world. Like that's, you're guaranteed that money, so if like crazy things happen, we would still have them, they would still have the money to build?
Are you referring to the NRP securing their
Yes.
financing? Yes, for all intents and purposes, when they secure that financing, it's, the promise is that they're ultimately opening that housing and being able to pay back the loan essentially that they're going to be taking to finance this project via the rents that will come over time, over the lifetime of the project.
And the reason I ask is because I just, yesterday, there were some apartments near my home, right? And they made all the people leave who could actually afford the rent there. And they're like, we're gonna turn it into condos. And it's been sitting there for a year. So I'm like, did they not get the money? Did it not work out? Does this happen a lot? Could this happen to us? And so it's just a question I have about like the project overall and securing finances. Even though we're not the ones doing it, I don't wanna not make sure people understand that, but.
Right, well, so when they close on that loan and close on their partnership with the equity provider, there will be certain conditions to them making draws and getting equity installments. But provided that they go through with that, then the money's gonna be there. Now, if, we go into World War III or crazy things happen, like maybe it doesn't happen, right? Maybe the deal doesn't come to fruition, but that's crazy things happening. So barring all of that, again, if they meet certain goals, then that money is going to come in.
I would add that the risk at this point is more upfront right now, between now and when we execute those ground leases, because they are going after financing, right? That's their job, is as they get the building permits and do their design, they have to secure that loan.
Okay.
So that's the risk, compared to more so once they break ground, like they're not gonna do that until they have the money in place. Certainly, yes, something far and extreme could happen during construction, but more likely, the risk is up front right now.
Okay, yep. So like, the most I've ever taken out is like $50,000. So I don't know, these are large sums, and I don't know how it really works, once you get over like a vehicle like that. So, but that was educative for me, and I'm sure there's somebody going like, what are they talking about? But that was just helpful, and thank you. We will now move. Mike, please. So sorry, thank you. We will move on. The next item on the agenda is the review of the current bylaws. On November 16th, 2023, the board members of the AISD Public Facility Corporation approved the current bylaws. Joining us today are Jeremy Striffler and Summer Greathouse, PFC Legal Counsel, to assist with the review.
Certainly, well, thank you again. And, when we started the PFC, we originally had all 9 trustees from the school district on the PFC board. Subsequent to that, we reduced the size of the board down to the 3 of you. And now that we've made a lot of progress with the Coy site, and as we think beyond the Coy site, it's definitely a time to think, okay, what are we doing moving forward beyond this one project, but also is there any elements of the bylaws, including your membership, that are worth taking a look at? And so Summers here can advise as to those types of questions, but we wanted to be able to speak today about the makeup of the board, and then also what is the vision, which isn't necessarily in all the wording of the bylaws, but the bylaws kind of prompt that conversation, and so that way we have guidance as to our next steps, not only if there's any kind of immediate action needed to revise bylaws, but also to start bringing you actual action items to consider and vote on. Because for, really until we execute the ground leases, there's not a lot of activity that is required of you as the PFC, but there is opportunity. And we want to make sure that you at least, to follow up on past presentations, know what the opportunity is for the PFC as ways to not only create workforce housing, but also to generate revenue, and to be able to think about that and consider, so that way we can then know how to bring those opportunities forward for consideration.
And so I think that last time that I was here, we talked a little bit about kind of some ideas potentially for your board, and how you have a lot of options, right? You're not just stuck with the three of you. If you wanted to go in and have some additional folks who aren't elected trustees, you could have a citizens board or committee to get folks who are in the industry or folks who have community involvement or things like that, to have their voice be heard as well. I do think something that's important to remember is that if a majority of your board is made up of unelected folks, then you have to start going to the city or the county for approval. So that's an additional step. That's going to add additional time, and also the potential that your deals don't go forward. You have open meetings. If people wanted to come here and speak, they could. So I would say, keep that in mind in terms of being a nimble board that can, move quickly and is not subject to a lot of outside influence. So that would be my recommendation to you. But you could easily have non-voting members, or again, like a citizens advisory committee that doesn't necessarily sit on the board, but they could come in and have, say their part. We've found that on a couple of the boards that I oversee, that's actually, it's been a really great thing for the community. They've brought a lot of great ideas and tend to be very active members of discussions, but they don't necessarily vote. So they're there for kind of all the, talking about everything, and then everybody tends to get along really well, and we vote on the projects and or don't and move forward. So that's an idea for you guys. All of these, any changes to that we make, we'll need to go back and amend your certificate of formation at the Secretary of State, as well as the bylaws. And I think we probably have some amendments we need to make to the certificate of formation anyways, to clean up a few items that maybe were missed during the previous adoption of bylaws. And so we'll make sure that we have everything aligned so that it all works together, because those two documents together are how this entity is governed. And we want to make sure that we have everything, all our I's dotted and T's crossed, so that every action you take has been properly approved. So I think that was something that we wanted to talk about. Is there anything, do you guys have any questions on that?
Do we have any questions? I mean, I have some, but I will let Lynn go ahead.
Thank you for this. I appreciate this. And I know we talked about this at our very first PFC meeting. So glad we're to a point where we can talk about this. I personally have had interest in adding 2 people to our board, so a non-majority. We have so much expertise in this area in our community, and really would love to bring some people. I am not an expert in this, and but I think I'm an expert in the values of our district and what we're hoping to get done. So I would really love to open to consider bringing in a couple of people to add to our board. And I love the idea of a citizens advisory group as well, because 2 people are 2, but I think there are a lot of people with an interest in this, and especially people who know the neighborhoods well where our properties are located. So I do have a lot of interest in that specific change as well. And then I think we do have questions to answer about what we want this to be, what kind of the values around that are going to determine how we do this work through the PFC, what we're trying to accomplish with it. I know it might look different for different projects, and I know that's part of why we chose you to be our council summer, is that you brought that big, broad expertise. And I know we've talked about housing and other opportunities, and I know that there's the potential of opportunities that are not on district-owned land, and I think that's a really big, deep conversation to have, not just with each other, but also with other taxing entities in our community, because we would be taking taxes away from ACC, from the city, from the county, and I think that's a really an important conversation to have community-wide, and would really love to consider adding 2 people to this board and then having a conversation, those conversations about with the 5 of us would be is my main interest with this.
Thank you. Director Gonzalez?
Yes, thank you. I feel very in the possibilities of adding individuals to the board. I think what I'd like to see is a table that would have maybe different scenarios, because I know different ones were just brought up of what a different configuration would look like, and how those members were chosen, and then what it would look like if more than however many unelected people were appointed, what the consequences of that would be. I also am wondering what the timeline is on us making a decision on what this configuration would look like and when this configuration would actually be seated and taking part in the decision making.
So in terms of the timeline, as quickly as you want to make that decision, we would have to obviously file the changes with the Secretary of State, and that can take kind of 30 to 45 days for that to actually take effect. So once that filing has been accepted by the Secretary of State, then those changes are in place. But you would take all of the action to approve it at the board level, the PFC level, and then also the Board of Trustees would need to approve the changes as well, so the larger group. And then after that happens, if we've passed those 2 resolutions, then I can submit everything to the Secretary of State. And then that's kind of like a 30 to 45 day process.
If you don't mind, Summer, maybe you could speak to the process for appointing to clarify how that works, how it's the larger board?
Correct. So the board members for this entity are appointed by the trustees as a whole. So it would have, anytime that you were appointing folks, whether it's yourselves as the trustees, once your terms are up, or it would be some external community members, those by statute have to be approved by the larger board.
And I have a follow-up question to that. Would we meet to make recommendations? Would we have an application process? How have you seen it done in other places? And what have you seen work well and not work well?
So what I've seen work well, I haven't seen anything not work well. So what we've seen other folks do is to have an application process. They can submit the applications. You may want to have a couple of you, or even all 3 of you, or your Board of Trustees, someone from that, have a committee that would be kind of a selection committee, so to review the applications, and then to kind of nominate folks from that application pool or the applicant pool, and then from there, the full Board of Trustees would appoint them.
Anything else, Director Gonzalez? Okay, thank you so much. So 3 is a really small number, and a walking quorum exists no matter what. You can talk to anybody. And recently, there was a contract, and you guys handled it really well, and thank you for that. But I was like, hey, I'm ready to sign this because I've had all my questions answered, but I could not ask them if they had their questions answered, right? And so just finding, like, I'm sure there's boards that you've seen that have 3 members, and hopefully we'll get all this done, go to SOS, and then we won't have to deal with having just, then we have the majority, or under the majority. So I guess it's just like, until we do that, best practices for communication, because we can't talk to each other.
Yeah. I think we have to have everything in an open meeting.
So we need to, I think, maybe then meet more often and instead of just meeting to do business, maybe meeting for information, updates, So we may need to think about scheduling that a little bit more in the interim of having to do the business so that we can have our questions answered. And then we can get with staff and figure out like what's a good rhythm for us to do that. I imagine with all our other meetings, it won't be like a lot, but it will be enough for us to come together and be able to have that communication until we can get a different number. And even then, with a different number, probably want to still keep that pattern of those information sessions kind of going. If that's, go ahead.
Absolutely, and I think just to build upon trustee or board member Gonzalez's question about timeline, you know, you can move as fast or as slow as you want. I think coming from my personal experience in real estate, right, that time changes everything. And so opportunities that are present today might not be present tomorrow, but I also am mindful of like us doing it right and doing it in the right sequence. And so being mindful of that. But certainly, yes, I think if you decide to enlarge the board, for now, I think a frequency, picking up the cadence would be helpful because there are questions to be had. You know, the PFC was created, from in the state of Texas with the value of creating workforce housing, but it also generates revenue. And so I don't want us to be naive about that if it's a strategy. But I think the challenge is we haven't had enough frequency of talking about, is that a strategy for us? If the focus is purely, we need to just increase the housing stock and knowing that it'll benefit our staff and our families to have more choice of, the various market rate, but also income restricted housing, right? More to choose from. And then not only will it benefit them, but it'll benefit the larger community in Austin, knowing that many of our first responders, nurses, even city employees, everyone's kind of in that same bucket of having this challenge of not affording market rate, but often not qualifying because they make too much for the big A affordable housing that the city has been pursuing with their bond, et cetera, and that there's some nonprofits around creating. So, having a great open discussion about, is the focus around the housing? Is it on the revenue generation, which obviously there's so much discussion right now about how we monetize real estate assets, but we also, through the PFC, there is a path where you can generate revenue from non-district owned land, or just other opportunities like bond issuance. And so is that kind of an aim for us as a board, as the PFC here to aspire to? Maybe it's a balance of both, but in terms of sequencing, we'll take guidance from you as to how quickly you want to move in terms of expanding the board, if that's a priority right now. But I would recommend we kind of get that in place before we start having all these discussions, because I think it sounds like we want the input from either the experts that you might bring on or even just the community members you bring on to the board, if not more trustees, which is also an option. The way we've written the bylaws is it's a minimum of 3. We have some new trustees on the school district board. I don't know if there's interest from other trustees to be part of this, to expand that, but that's also an option for you beyond appointing people as well. So a lot to consider, but I think my takeaway from this is our first step is if getting clarity from you all that you want to move forward, and then we can kind of follow up with a recommendation of like, well, here's the next steps and how you would do that in terms of how would you create either an application process, here's how you would bring recommendations to a larger board so that they can vote on appointing people, et cetera. Like, let us put that together for you, but I want to make sure that you're all in agreement on that.
Mm-hmm. I heard Director Gonzalez ask for more information, I think, before we're ready to do that. So I think part of the question is kind of what cadence could we get more information, kind of really see all the options written out, and then come back to discuss that maybe pretty promptly. Mm-hmm. So we can talk in a little more specificity about what it would look like to make those changes and get a voting meeting in place to change the bylaws. Does that capture what we're all hearing?
It does. Excuse me. And that's just what I was going to mention. I was like, in the discussion that you were we were having right now, sounded like the agenda for the next meeting of the things that need to be posted for those discussions. And so just like, any other meeting, we could get that document, like, read it, submit our questions, and then when we come to have that meeting, we're ready to have that discussion.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to move forward. And in that meeting also, we can sort of, after having gained some more knowledge about what it would look like, what it could look like, what are the consequences if we do certain things, then I think that, in that meeting, we can probably give you a much better guidance and direction. Again, because we won't be chatting outside of that meeting. So I think that will be our next move, is to get that information. I don't have a timeline on there. I don't know, like, maybe you have that in a file, or maybe you have to go pull some things. So however long it takes you to get that, and you feel comfortable like presenting that out to us. So that's that time band. I don't know what that is. And then just know that we would like to come back pretty darn quick so that we can, after we get that information, to discuss it. Is that agreeable? I'm looking over there, he's up there. Okay, awesome.
May I just ask a clarifying question? So
Yes,
what you're
please.
Director Gonzalez, what you're asking for is a table with just kind of the suggestions that I've gone over today, along with any potential consequences or additional things to think through? Is that what I'm understanding the ask is?
Exactly. Almost like what I was envisioning was like a pro-con table for different possible configurations, directions that we would go in. But if you think there's another way to better present that information, absolutely. That was just what first popped into my head.
I'm a table person. I like tables. So that sounds great. Okay, and I could, if I could suggest, we could almost do like a workshop and have it be kind of like a working back and forth, right? I'll throw some ideas out there. You guys come with your questions. And then from there, then we can come up with kind of what the framework looks like, and then maybe present something at a following board meeting for, the framework that we want to take forward as a final approval and go to the Board of Trustees with. I do think that we should be tracking this for definitely before we approve Anita Coy. Because I would like to be able to clean up the certificate of formation as well. So I would like for everything to be like all the I's dotted and T's crossed before we get to any final approvals.
So that puts us on a pretty speedy timeline. Are you saying it needs to go through the Secretary of State or be submitted to the Secretary of State?
We need to have everything through. I mean, that's what I have based on the timeline that Jeremy was going over for Anita Coy, is that we would be closing the deals and executing the leases in November. So we'd probably be coming here in October for final approval.
Okay.
I don't think you need to take any action as the board with respect to the transfer of the land, not the PFC board. But obviously the trustees need to take that action. So I think really our absolute drop dead would be getting probably submitted to the Secretary of State like July, August, to feel really good about everything being good to go by October.
Great.
For that final approval.
I was worried you meant March before we transferred the land, so I'm glad that's not what we're talking about. Okay.
And then a piece for me, for whomever may need that information, you're saying that there's some things that we need to clean up. I'd really like to know what those are, like just sort of an outlay of like, hey, we went to this, we didn't know that was gonna be this. I changed my business name. It was a whole thing, right? All I did is like still my name. I changed like some other things on it, but I had to submit the paper, pay the fee again. Yeah, all of those sorts of things. And I know you probably want to take the addition of the 2 members plus any of those other things like all at once, because it's a pain to go back and forth. I only did it once. Well, I did it twice, but yeah.
And because it's a PFC and it's a creature of statute and it's heavily statutorily regulated, this is a much more difficult process to go through than like an LLC or a partnership. So, yes.
Okay, gotcha.
The fewest number of times we can amend this, the best,
ma'am.
the way
Yes, ma'am.
better.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Anything else?
I would ask, when we have that meeting, that it might also be valuable to have a preliminary presentation of kind of the menu of possibilities. You were talking about revenue generation, developing on non-district land, for-profit rather than, more than affordable housing. Just to have, we don't need to be exhaustive about it, but I think just so we can start thinking about it and start being transparent with our community about it, that, we pulled this together talking about workforce housing, but there are other possibilities. And so I think that would be great to discuss
Absolutely.
at that next meeting as well.
Absolutely. And I think as Summers recommended, like a workshop format.
Yeah, and that
we
would be
can
great.
present all that. And we'll follow up post-meeting in terms of how, kind of what we anticipate turnaround to get you all that information. But
Perfect.
also we'll be flexible to meet as quickly as you all can also meet as well.
Great. Thank you.
So sorry. I'm so sorry. I always want to use my teacher voice. I apologize. I need to be amplified. My whole life, they don't want to amplify me. Now I have to be amplified. Okay. If there's nothing else, then this would conclude our meeting. Secretary Boswell, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Oh, there's more to read, Candace. Okay. Secretary Boswell, okay, this meeting is adjourned at
What time is it? 5:38.
5:38. Excellent. We're all good.
Beautiful.
Thank you.